Hello, and welcome to the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
I'm your co-host, Alex.
And this is the 0 episode for Grass Kings. This is no spoilers, just a look at the series, help you decide, do you want to pick this up and read along with us as we get ready to do a deep dive, trade by trade, for the 3 trade paperbacks of Grass Kings. So, to start off, I think we'll start with the simple Boom Studios synopsis, and Alex will dive into Boom Studios a little bit more. But here's what they have to say about the series, which I would grant it C- in terms of a synopsis. But
you grading the synopsis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, not the series. No, I love the series. The synopsis. It says, eldest brother, Robert, leads a grief-stricken life, having lost his daughter to a tragic accident, followed by his wife disappearing one morning never to return. When an enigmatic young woman named Maria flees to their community in search of safe haven, Robert takes her in. Will his decision lead to ruin and retribution, dooming the kingdom? From New York Times best-selling writer Matt Kindt, Mind Management, and Peter Panzerfaust artist Tyler Jenkins, comes a rural mystery series chronicling the tragic lives of the Grass Kings, 3 brothers and rulers of a trailer park kingdom, a fiefdom of the hopeless and lost, of the desperate poor seeking a promised land. That's a mouthful at the end there. I actually think that's pretty great last sentence.
The last sentence, definitely. That's a great description of the setting for the story.
Yeah, so there are 3 buckets for this. There's the setting, there's the plot, and then there are how do we
the theme.
The theme, yeah. And they're not mixed and matched in the way that you would expect. But the last thing we'll give you here from Boom directly is a character synopsis. Now, they give you 5 characters, ostensibly your 5 key characters, and I think that's true. But I think there are probably a couple more that I would cover if I were writing this. But
it's definitely true for the initial the first volume.
For the first volume,
yeah. And
there's what you need hitting the ground.
And then maybe a couple here and there will drop off.
Yeah, it's a preview. It's not an encyclopedia.
Yeah. But if you know these characters, if you're aware of these characters, kind of going in, this will be helpful as you jump into the story. You understand what at least initially what the relationship of everybody is to each other before you jump into the story. So I think it's helpful.
Robert, first character, and I think Alex and I discovered after finishing the entire series that their last name is King.
We think it's
even
King.
Though it's I think it's in the chronicling the tragic lives of the Grass Kings.
Well, again, Grass Kings. Yeah. So is that a play off Grass Kingdom?
Because they're monarchs.
Or are they the It could be all the above. It's entirely possible.
I think it's all of it.
It might be.
We think that. Anyway, they all wear a king logo, a crown at some point. But anyway, middle brother. Robert is the middle brother to Asher and Bruce and leader of the Grass Kingdom. Maintains a tenuous grasp on his rule and his sanity after losing his youngest daughter and subsequently his wife years prior. Bruce, the eldest brother to Robert and Asher, a former sheriff of the town Raven, having left in disgrace, Bruce now patrols the kingdom, acting as its unofficial police force. Asher, youngest brother to Robert and Bruce, more like a son than a sibling. Great synopsis there on Asher.
Yeah, right, that's
almost nothing.
That's about all we need to know.
It is all you need, basically.
If you understand his relationship to his brothers and know what his brothers' positions are in the kingdom, you can really get a sense of the kind of person Asher is and what motivates his actions and what motivates his decisions. I think you don't need much more than that because he doesn't get much more characterization than that. But that's all. That's everything you need to know because it's
as long as you understand that he is related to them, even though he acts like a child. That basically sums it up. Then you have Maria, a mysterious woman who rises from a lake and shows up on Robert's doorstep, who he then helps nurse back to health. Could she be Robert's long-lost daughter returned? And Maria, I would say, is she's important in the first arc, not the most important character overall, but she is your...
I will say, she's your entry point in, because
she's your keyhole view of the grass. It's the reason... the kingdom will be exposited to us is that we follow
but
the stranger.
Her importance, her specific importance, I think varies
trade to trade.
I think she's more important in 1.
But again, this is an entry point.
A little less important in 2, more important in 3 again. So it varies.
Then we get Humbert, who actually is Humbert Jr., evil sheriff of the rival town Cargill, which sits on the other side of the lake and has been suspicious of the Grass Kingdom for years and would like nothing more than to shut down the entire operation. That's all we get from Boom, including currently, when the whole series has been out for years. They've not revisited it. That's the initial pitch, and they just leave it up.
And I said, I think that gives you a good entryway into the first volume.
I'm not sure it's that. It is a good entryway. I'm not sure anything there grabs you.
No.
And do we want to go creative team next, or do we want to talk about why we picked up this book initially and then for the podcast?
Well, let's go creative team first. I think that works with kind of how both of us ended up picking up the book. Books from Boom Studios. It was published from March 17th to May 18th, March 2017 to May 2018. It's 15 issues, and that was no skips, no missed months, which is pretty awesome, pretty incredible. Writer is Matt Kindt. The full artist for the first 8 issues was Tyler Jenkins. Starting with issue 9, his wife Hillary came on as colorist, and Tyler and Hillary now pretty much always work as a team. I think everything they do, he draws and she colors / paints. And the letterer is Jim Campbell. So Matt Kindt is an incredibly accomplished writer. One of the few writers in comics who has not found success with the big 2, but has also not sought out success with the big 2. He is someone that has worked primarily in independently published comics throughout his entire life, his entire career.
I wrote down that he's the indie man's indie. He's not a guy who's swinging for the fences with Marvel and DC.
No.
He's started self-publishing at age 17.
He's got just a handful of stuff from the big 2. I will say one notable one, which at the time was published on Vertigo, DC Vertigo imprint. It's now been reissued under Black Label. It's a book called Revolver, which is a very interesting, very cool concept book that he's a writer and artist with.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was another this is the orange watercolory one.
It's
like lots of orange and reds. It's warm tones.
Yeah, kind of. It
almost monochromatic with its orange.
Mostly monochromatic with dabs here and here of color. But the vast majority of his work, I would say, has been done with Dark Horse, to the point where he now just recently started up his own imprint at Dark Horse called the Flux House. So while he's written across a number of different publishers, including Boom, which this book is on, and has worked with Tyler Jenkins, Tyler and Hillary on books for both Boom and Dark Horse. Dark Horse is kind of where he is right now. Mind Management, probably maybe his best known work.
I would say
writer,
Mind
artist.
Management, especially since it is kicking back up in 2022.
Yeah.
And it's very long.
Mind Management.
I think Department H is up there.
Department H, which he did with his wife Charlene.
And that's Dark Horse. As well.
That's also Dark Horse. Yeah. He has written a number of books, a series of books called Ether with artist David Rubin at Dark Horse. I think there have been 2 or 3 different 6-issue miniseries. Yeah, Ethers in that world, which are very, very cool and very
that's
trippy.
Kind of when we cover a Dark Horse project, we'll get into that. But that's kind of Dark Horse's wheelhouse, right? It's they're not, build a little universe and you tell pocket stories in it.
There's not a lot of 85 issue runs of something.
It's few subsequently is very difficult for some readers to follow. Black Hammer being that way,
Kindt is also starting a few years back. He was like the main writer at Valiant when Valiant relaunched their entire line.
Right.
Valiant is a publisher that I have to admit I have never read a single comic from. But they have been out there. They've been out there. I think it started in the late 80s, 89, I think. It was started by Jim Shooter, former editor-in-chief at Marvel. And they've been publishing. They have their own universe of superhero comics, of characters, like X-Men of War.
No, Bloodshot.
Bloodshot.
Yeah, I've read. Okay,
Rye,
so I read Lemire's Bloodshot.
Yeah. So they in 2017 or something like that, I think, around the mid 2010s, they kind of did a revamp. Valiant did their whole line, and Kindt did a whole bunch of stuff with them, writing a whole bunch of characters. And did that for several years, I think to about 2018, 2019. So yeah, he's you're most likely to find him Dark Horse, Boom, things like that.
Top Shelf is another one he's done some work for.
Done a little bit with Top Shelf. Top Shelf is now owned by
a smidge for Bad Idea.
Bad Idea was a real bad idea.
Yeah.
Top Shelf, I think, is now owned by IDW.
Okay.
So, but yeah, specifically with Tyler Jenkins, after Grass Kings, he did a book, Fear Case. Actually, I think he did Black Badge first.
Black Badge and Fear Case
at Boom, and then Fear Case at Dark Horse. And I think going forward, I think the vast majority, if not all, of Kindt's work is going to be his creator-owned work is going to be on Dark Horse going forward.
Yeah.
So he's someone that here's Grass Kings, a story that he just wrote. Didn't write and draw, but he is someone who cartoons and does his own stuff. He has a style that is actually not unlike Tyler Jenkins' style.
They're very similar. In fact,
yeah.
The first time I picked up something that Matt Kindt had done, it was something that he wrote and drew, and I grabbed it because I thought it was Jeff Lemire's work.
Yeah, Jeff Lemire.
And so that's another
else.
one in that same rough sketch watercolors. Mm-hmm. But I love the ability of a writer who can depict visually what he wants to write, but also knows how to trust another artist with it.
Yeah,
I think that's a rare breed.
I think it's got to be tough for some guys, and I always wonder specifically with those guys, with those writers who also do their own work, writing and drawing their own things. I wonder what their scripts are like. Like if I'm sure some of these guys know.
Yeah,
and a lot of the guys we end up talking about who write and draw their own stuff and also write for other people. A lot of times work with the same artists over and over again, people they're familiar with. So
right.
I'm sure they get to a shorthand of what their scripts look like, but I do wonder if
probably doesn't translate very well to the big two, right? Because
probably not.
You may not even get to meet the artist you're working with.
Yeah,
because his longest stint. He just, as far as I know, he's never done anything with Marvel. His longest stint with DC was 2013 and 14. He did 6 issues in Suicide Squad, which is probably one contract, right?
It's like probably one arc. Yeah,
you write a 6-issue arc. You give us a script. We'll handle everything else. And I'm saying he may not have even seen the final product.
Your scripts for the big two are vastly, but I do wonder when you're working with even a guy that somebody he's familiar with, like Tyler Jenkins, he's done multiple projects with. I wonder if his scripts, include. I wonder if they include more or less detail, which way it goes in terms of visually, because either he has an idea of how he would do it. Does he say,
or does he know? Or Tyler so well that he's like, if I tell him this, he'll do that.
Exactly. Is it a less is more thing, or if I just describe what it is, I know what I'm going to get, or do I say this is what I have pictured in my head? Do your version of it, because I could see it going that way too.
I can easily see it. So when we get them on the podcast for an interview, we'll hit them up about that.
Definitely. So as I mentioned, the artist is Tyler Jenkins. Tyler is a Canadian illustrator. He has worked mainly independently. The first big thing he did was Peter Panzerfaust with writer Curtis Wiebe. I have never read that. I've never seen that. I'm not familiar with that.
It's an acclaimed book. Yeah. It's hard to get your hands on. I'll put it that way. So you can buy it digitally.
Now. maybe
there's no scarcity.
Library,
digitally.
Something like that. Yeah.
But you will not find single issues of. They're not expensive. They're just
not
low print number.
They're not there. Mm-hmm. I think most of his notable work has been through Boom. like I said, this book here and Black Badge, both with Matt Kindt, King of Nowhere with writer W. Maxwell Prince, and a book called Snowblind with writer Ollie Masters. It's he works in the watercolor style, something that we'll talk about a lot throughout the discussion of Grass Kings, and whether it's him coloring and painting or it's his wife Hillary, there is just there's really a lushness and a beautiful setting to it.
And for whatever reason, I mean, and I guess you could probably deduce this in reverse, but I'm just going to call it out. For whatever reason, watercolorists are some of my favorite artists, and the big two never use watercolors.
And it's probably a house style thing.
I'm trying to think of an exception. I think it's just too hard to imitate, and long-running superhero story arcs don't want to be inked for 6, watercolored for 6, back to ink. Even if you're changing artists, you want some degree of continuity.
For it to happen, it has to be like a limited miniseries. Like off the top of my head, I can think of recently
Pearl. One of those?
No. Well, that's fucking Gatos. That's Bendis' thing. I was thinking of Robin and Batman. It was a 3-issue miniseries that was Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. Yeah. So it's got to be something self-contained. You're rarely going to see that jumping in on a.
And that was not part of the main continuity in any way.
That's
just a
outside miniseries thing. Yeah. So it's a style that you're really not going to see. Mainly at the big two and superhero books, it doesn't fit with the house style. So you have to go somewhere to a creator-owned independent publisher, and that gets you the great diversity in art style and art look, and it's something that doesn't look like anything else on the shelf right now. So, and like I said, Tyler was the sole credited artist for the first 8 issues, and then his wife Hillary was brought on as colorist from issue 9 on. And then finally, the last member of the team is Jim Campbell, the letterer. He has done an incredible amount of work for Boom, including Black Badge, the other series that this creative team has done together, plus a book called Joyride that I really liked, the Firefly books, which are at Boom, Giant Days, which is one of my favorite comics. But he's pretty much, if it's a major book from Boom, he's pretty much going to be the guy who has lettered it. So,
and he has a high reverence for the style of Kindt and Jenkins.
Yeah, he works really well with those guys.
He can fit a lot of words on a page without obscuring any of the art.
Yeah, I think
that's a really delicate, tricky balance.
And I think it's no wonder that he's someone who's worked with them before, has experience with them, right, and probably will continue working with them down the line whenever he can. There are some really really cool and interesting lettering choices throughout Grass Kings to depict kind of different times. Like there's a time when it goes to like newsprint, like a typewriter style,
yes,
and it's very clear and obvious to the reader that this isn't narration or thoughts. This is like you're reading the text of something that was printed before, and
right,
and he makes choices like that. And I think it comes with familiarity with the people you're working with, the person writing the script and the person delivering the art. You know what to expect, and you can come to the best way to integrate that into a seamless story. Yeah,
and so I've just got a couple things to add here, and then a couple clips from an interview that we will link to the full interview with Kindt and Jenkins on our site. The other thing that I wanted to note, which I think we did note, is that Kindt, while a writer, is also a formidable artist on his own. And my footnote for that is see Black Hammer 45, which he wrote and illustrated.
Yeah.
And that is his style. You would look at that, and first of all, you'd flip through it and think, Black Hammer is Jeff Lemire's universe. This could easily be Jeff Lemire's art. And you would flip through it and say, this could easily be Tyler Jenkins stylistically. If you put them all side by side, you can distinguish the three artists for sure. But if you're a fan of one, you're going to like the other.
Yeah.
Style-wise, and this is relevant for Grass Kings, Kindt seems to have a proclivity for mystery detective style, but not noir. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not the old timey. They're always in new and kind of modern settings. And I'm thinking, Department H, Mind Management, Grass Kings. I have not finished reading Black Badge. I can't speak to that. But there's almost always some mystery, some sleuthing going around.
Yeah, I mean,
even as there are other elements.
And there, I can say Black Badge has that. Fear Case has that. Whether the characters themselves are like specifically cops or detectives or whatnot, right. There is always some element.
Yeah, in
to
the
that.
same way that like Harry Potter is always a sleuthing thing, even though none of them are detectives and they're kind of idiots.
Yeah.
Kindt also likes flashbacks a lot. As a storytelling device, books like Department H, he will juggle two separate narratives on one page at the same time.
Well,
so one you'll be advancing a story visually, while a backstory will be playing in someone's head in the text bubbles. And I think that's where, when you find a Jim Campbell who is able to distinguish, like, here's the text that's moving forward in the character's head as they do this unrelated task, and we're pushing both stories forward at the same time, that's where you find partnerships that you just lock in.
Yeah. And you say flashbacks, and I think it is mostly flashbacks, but he really does like to play with time and the framing of time. Whether it's something like Department H, say multiple timelines on the same page. The book he did for DC Vertigo, Revolver, is the premise of the story is that the main character every single day wakes up in a different, he alternates between what he thinks is his regular reality and then a parallel reality where basically the world has ended. And every single day he's interacting with the same people in his life, but he wakes up one day and he has the experience in one world. He goes to sleep, wakes up, and now he's back in the other day. And every day goes back and forth, and he's trying to figure out how to maneuver, how to maybe fix one world and save the other, or vice versa. He's trying to figure out which one is the quote-unquote real world, but he's learning things from both timelines, and he has to do that at the same time. So the idea that these things are happening, he likes to play with time and explore that, both as a plot device and also as a storytelling device.
Right.
There's always some element of that, typically in his stories.
Yeah, and Grass Kings is no exception. Mm-hmm. Grass Kings will almost always open on a shot in the past, at least early on, with a narration in the present.
Yes.
And that's the juxtaposition that Kindt really thrives in. Yeah. The last thing I'll note about Kindt for now is that he has multiple Eisner nominations, no wins yet.
Yeah.
Which he's long overdue.
Grass Kings was an Eisner-nominated book.
It was, and it didn't win. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. To me, he feels like one of those people like Leonardo DiCaprio with his Oscar. Like, when he finally gets it, we're going to be like, on that book?
Yeah, it'll be
like
His Scent of a Woman.
We know, we know that he was overdue, so we're just going to give it to him on whatever he does next. Nothing against The Revenant, which I deeply enjoyed and DiCaprio deserved, but yada yada. But he deserved one long before.
But a lot of things against Scent of a Woman, because Al Pacino had many better roles than that.
For sure.
But
what do you think of the Eisners, by the way? Do you?
I generally like them because this sounds funny. I generally like the Eisners because they aren't fan voted.
Okay.
Because you have to be a member of the comic industry. You have to be a writer, artist, inker, letterer, a publisher, an editor, a professional, like you run a store or whatnot, publication wise. So it's people who are in the comic industry giving awards to comic people. So in that way, it's a little insular, like the Oscars are. And the Oscars always have this problem of like, no one's seen these movies. They don't like the box office. But then I'm of the general opinion that like fans are stupid, like present company included. Yeah. So like what I like shouldn't be any like barometer for what's actually good. Like I actually,
right. And that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Like I like what I like.
Yeah. Like if like, I know what kind of writers I like. I know what kind of artists I like. I don't care if they are good writers or bad writers or good artists, but someone who does it for a living, like you should be able to judge what you think is good and bad. And so I don't do that.
And I actually do like the barometer of when someone wins an Eisner I know what it means, and I learn something about my taste based on how I interact with the Eisner-winning material.
Yeah.
And more often than not, I can't remember a time when I picked up an Eisner-winning book and was disappointed.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's not always the case. I'll pick up some Pulitzer Prize-winning books, and I'm like, I think I can guess why you liked this, but it was not deserving of any award, let alone that award.
I think with the Eisners and with comics, if you have the right kind of right mindset, you're not going to enjoy every book because not every story is going to be for you, and that's fine. Maybe the art style isn't for you, but I think you can be able to appreciate why something was nominated or why something won. Even if the art style isn't for you, you can look at it and understand the technical level of why this was awarded or honored, even if it isn't a style that you happen to like.
Right.
And that happens all the time, and I think that's a good thing about comics, and that not everyone.
that happens with Oscars and Emmys and Grammys. And,
and I had a conversation relatively recently, which may not be recent for when you're listening to this, but with my brother, he was throwing back some art from the 90s, comic book art from the 90s, and it's so ridiculous. It was the height of the guys who ended up leaving for Image, Liefeld, Jim Lee, Welsh Potasio, McFarlane, all those guys. He was talking about how ridiculous some of these character designs looked, and I was like, well, that was the state of the art. Like that's just what it was. And he was like, yeah, I know. It's still kind of depressing to look back at, but
it's a bummer to read arcs like that. But I also appreciate knowing which decade I'm holding just by grabbing it.
Yeah, but because of that, that kind of like homogeneous nature of like everything looks this way, all the characters are designed their way, everyone has a similar style across the board, that basically broke comics and it almost destroyed the industry. But you start getting to now, you can have much more incredibly varied art. You have many more options now, which I think allows more people to look at and be like, well, I don't like this, I don't like that, but I really like this over here.
But I think the internet has helped that a lot too, because you and I can access previews for things. As opposed to, in the 90s.
Well, it was previews are still printed. It's a book you could order.
Right, it's a book you could order.
And you had Wizard magazine.
Right. But it was harder to see obscure things from indie publishers.
Well, they also weren't,
because your local shop may not have an obligation to order any of it.
And then that wasn't, well, it also didn't really exist back then. It took Image in the early 90s to kind of force the hand.
89.
Valiant was 89. Yeah, so they're bubbling there, and it was rare, but that kind of market share took a while to even be a thing. And it started with a place like Image, where that gave creators the rights, and it gave them a great deal to do the book that they wanted to do in the way they wanted to do it. But yeah, so with something like the Eisners, they have such a wide range of styles and books, just a humongous range to pull from. Yeah, what they happen to land upon as nominees and as winners, it's probably not always going to be your style. But I think if you appreciate the art form of comic storytelling.
Well, and when you consider how much is out there now, you understand why Matt Kindt can be respected by everyone and not yet have won. Yeah. But you also see like your guy, Tom King, pulling in multiple Eisner nominations every year.
Yeah.
Not multiple over the course of his career. Yeah. Every year he's got multiple books on the slate.
He has a book out there,
and it's always which Tom King book this year are we going to give something to?
Mitch Gerrits as an artist, but also I think the not just specific to Eisner nominations or wins for Matt Kindt, but a guy who can have the career he's had, the success he's had, the notoriety he's had, without relying the big two sex, the success there. It was always the Robert Kirkman thing. Always said, it was what you're supposed to do is, the path is make your first comic. You get out there, you get a name. From there, you go to one of the big two. You get put on a big book. that gets your name, that gets your audience bigger. Then you leave, you go to Image, and you do your book, the one that you own, after you've built an audience somewhere else.
Right.
You know, they said that was the path to go.
And I think for the most part, still is. I mean, that's
and a lot of guys do that path, and it's lucrative. It's because when you're working for the big two, you got a paycheck coming in. Your name gets out there. People are seeing it on a regular basis, and you hope that translates over when you do your own creator-owned stuff. But a guy like Matt Kindt didn't do that. Now,
right.
Not saying he hasn't done kind of IP work, because again, Valiant is their own superhero universe. So he's written superheroes. He's
right.
written in connected universes. He's done
but he never had anything that's going to be adapted to film or TV.
Yeah,
nothing that became like.
Although he could, though, some
people
of his
shipping
books,
them all off to CGC. Oh yeah,
some of his books,
all of his stuff could be adapted.
I don't know about Grass Kings would be a little weird.
No, I think it'd be a good miniseries.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
Especially with some of the tweaks that you and I suggest. The final cutting room.
Yeah.
In terms of just knowing where you're going.
Maybe
from the end. But
so.
Enough on Matt. Aside to say that he's lives in St. Louis, and my old comic shop there, which is now called Apotheosis, on South Grand in Tower Grove. He occasionally made an appearance there. I did not appreciate his work enough when I lived there back in 2013, 14, 15. Now I would totally geek out if he walked into the shop that I was in. So that's just a raw hand I was dealt by fate. Tyler Jenkins, I have not nearly as much information on. This dude is like a grass king. He lives off the grid. His own website, which he links to from his Twitter bio, is non-existent. It's just down. He's not maintained it. His Image Comics wiki has no personal history, is completely empty. So I had to comb through interviews and get a little bit of information because I wanted to get inside his head, since we're doing this podcast on something that's so iconic for him. And in an interview with Multiversity Comics, he revealed that he has a Bachelor of Design in Visual Communication with a major in illustration. He did not say from where, but from him, that's like a whole biography. He is Canadian, and I don't know where in Canada. I don't think it's Toronto.
I don't think so. I don't know. Not certain.
But anyway, the book Grass Kings actually came about as Tyler's idea. And the quote is, he said, the initial thought was simply my reaction to thinking about the loss of a child. So that particular grief, that particular pain, he went to Matt Kindt and said, I would love to illustrate a story. This is the idea. Maybe he had some concept art kind of fleshed out and said, this is the pain that I want to wrestle with. Can you write a story around this? And Grass Kings is what they came up with. And there's a great longer interview about its reaction to society and things like that, which I don't want to get into spoilers for our podcast or for what you'll read. So I'm going to leave that in our show notes at storiedarcs.com. You can check that out. But there were a couple comments that I thought were really interesting from Tyler Jenkins that I thought just illuminated his style. Just two snippets from that interview. He mentioned that doing covers is more challenging. He doesn't like covers. And if you'll notice, this is also kind of a Boom Studios thing. There are no variants. No, there are variants.
There are variants, yeah.
Not until later. But it's all variants by the same creative team. They're not just farming out variants to
Matt Kindt, because
a bunch of other people.
Because Matt is an artist himself. The most of the variants are by
But it's not
Matt
10
Kindt.
different variants. It's not foil variants. No. It's just, here's one variant here and there. And Tyler doesn't like doing covers, and they said, no, why are covers more challenging? And he says this, and this is all quoting Tyler, because it's not about the acting. My focus is I love portraying the acting and the performances in the story, capturing emotions, whereas covers are more metaphorical or iconic. They have to summarize. They're not part of the narrative, and I think that's why I find them more difficult. End quote. Now, I thought that was a fascinating insight. I never thought about that with covers. In fact, I've always expected covers to reveal something about the story, to capture part of the narrative, and for the most part, especially in the big two, they frequently don't, especially when you get into variants.
No.
Variants is just like, look at this pretty picture.
Covers, it's a rarity when the cover action depicted actually has something to do with the story.
Yeah.
Even if the person doing the cover is the person who did the interiors, person who knows what the story is, a lot of times they are unconnected. Most times it's just most times.
And Jenkins says, "I don't like it." He's like, "I want anything I draw to be part of the narrative arc, to be moving the story or the characters forward." And the covers don't do that. Yeah. Yet the covers are what sell the book. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what, at least early on, that's what moves a book off the shelves. Mm-hmm. And so, then they get into the way he draws characters, which, by the way, I note, I think in episode 1, we'll point out the character who basically looks exactly like Tyler Jenkins.
Yes.
But the interviewer said, well, what are you looking for in the way characters behave in their facial foibles? Are you looking for anything specific in terms of acting? And Tyler Jenkins says, myself in a mirror more than anything. And I suppose some of the performance is probably influenced by old 60s and 70s war movies where they weren't overacted. They were iconically acted, I think. The characters aren't stereotypes, but heroes are heroes, More than anything, it's about channeling my love of those older movies and watching myself in the mirror acting it out. End quote. And so what I think is interesting about that is he likes a simple kind of raw, earnest nature to it. If you compare the acting in Bridge on the River Kwai to the acting in Saving Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan is much grittier. People are much more intense. Every line has this fiercity and bigness to
intense,
it. Yeah. And it's like when you see people behave like that in real life, it's kind of cheesy.
They look ridiculous.
Right? It's like you're really like, I was going to say hamming it up.
But no, it seems wildly unnatural.
Even though it's so good to watch.
Yes.
Right? It's so good to watch. And Tyler Jenkins is like, I like that. Here's the line, I'm delivering it. Like I didn't live in a trailer and eat glass for 3 days in method acting school and do all this other stuff. Like, I got paid to say this line while holding a cigarette and sitting here in my army apparel.
With that in mind, when you look at and read Grass Kings, there is a
unadorned.
Yeah, there is kind of a retro feel to it. There is a sense of that. Yeah, that these are regular, normal people.
And I don't think, and I think that matches Kindt's style too. They don't speak in a flowery way. They're not overly expressive. Sometimes they don't even say as much as you would like them to say in terms of just trying to follow them.
Yeah. And I think for the most part, I think early on, we talk about Humbert's a bit of a caricature.
A bit, but then they surprised me.
Yeah, but for the most part,
me again.
For the most
part, me both times I read it.
For the most part, the rest of the characters, no one is really a trope. No one is,
and no one's a shining hero, and no one's like a pure evil villain. No. Everyone is various shades of gray.
We definitely talk about how they're, obviously there are always protagonists and antagonists, but that doesn't mean there are good guys and bad guys.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And there's no. In fact, I think if you find yourself gravitating towards a character in this, it's going to say more about you than it does about the book, because. I think another analogy is that Alex brings up later is like watching The Wire.
Yeah,
where it's like, the ostensive good guys are kind of dirty, and some of the bad guys have really good motives, or do kind of heroic or selfless things, and so you just always have to choose. So, anyway, that's Tyler Jenkins, and I think those couple quotes and the rest of that interview really sums him up well. I think we covered Jim Campbell pretty well. Mm-hmm. Certainly, there's not much more that I can say other than the fact that these two guys, Matt and Tyler, work together. Their names are on the front cover, and Hillary. And they consistently continue to work with Jim Campbell because he's delivering exactly what their storytelling and their art delivers. There's nothing worse than jarring or generic lettering that looks like it wasn't part of the creative effort.
Yeah. Yeah, there needs to be a familiarity there with who's writing it, and then how it's what the artwork's going to look like when you're placing the letters on there. Have an idea of what the artist is going to be doing, so it can all work. It can all work together.
Yeah. So final question, I guess, before we wrap this Zero episode is, what drew you to this initially, and then when I think I pitched doing this one in the podcast. What made you?
For me, it was the art, because I had read maybe right before this book came out, on a whim, I had read the book Snowblind, which is a book that Tyler Jenkins had done on for Boom with Ollie Masters. Ollie Masters is a writer that I was familiar with, but I think I picked this up like on a sale at Comixology, like the trade was on sale.
Oh, really?
And I saw
the trade. Okay.
I saw the trade for the Snowblind, and I was like, this looks really good. The art style reminded me at the time. It reminded me of Sean Phillips,
sure.
That watercolor style, and so it was probably on sale for some ridiculously low price, and so I bought it digitally, this book Snowblind, and read it. I enjoyed it. I thought the art was beautiful. And then when I saw Grass Kings, I think something in my back mind was like, that looks familiar. I wonder if the same guy. Because at that point, I had not read any of Matt Kindt's stuff that I had known of. Like, when this book came out in early 2017. So I hadn't read anything like Department H, My Management, anything like that. So this, I think, was the first time I had read anything by Matt Kindt. And so it was simply the watercolor art. And going based solely off of that and thinking this book looks really good, and so I'll give it a shot, and then really loving the world they had built, and then from there knowing more, like, oh, Matt Kindt, I've heard that name before, and seeing other things he had done and other things I had seen and been aware of, and seeing the other kind of creators he had worked with, and so starting at one spot with the artist and moving in through kind of the rest of both of their kind of full, their full kind of library of comics.
Yeah, and I had basically a similar story. I wasn't anticipating it, but I went in on a Wednesday, New Comic Day, saw Grass Kings 1, and I always go to the indie section and always look for first issues. I'm like, what's my next obsession? And the art drew me in. Grass Kings 1, it's simple, unadorned. It looked like it's not going to be capes and heroes, which it isn't. It was just, it's like watching an indie movie, which I think is kind of, it's like seeing the poster for a movie. It's like looking at the first
cover one.
It's saying definitely. Like, I'll spend an hour of my life, watching that movie or whatever. And that's basically how I landed there. And then I had mixed emotions going through the series. I really liked the first arc. I stumbled a bit on the second arc, and then I really loved the way it ended. And I have not picked it up since it originally came out.
Neither have I.
And so I suggested it. I was like, we're doing this indie thing. I'd like to rotate publishers. I'd like to talk about more creators. And I think this is a really great one because it was my introduction to Matt Kindt, even though I've now read Mind Management, Department H.
Yes,
some
same.
other stuff.
Yeah, I've gone back and read most of the stuff.
This is my entry point into him. And I felt very fond of it. So that's basically... all I have to say before we dive into Volume 1. Yeah,
no, I think it's. I think the last thing we'll say real quick, just on, because I don't know, whoever's listening right here, maybe not totally familiar with a publisher like Boom, depending on when they've came into comics and how much they've read. I think a lot of people know Image. They are the number one independent publisher. Back in the day, Image had about 10 to 12% of the market share. This is kind of going off of pre-COVID numbers. On any given month, you could really you could break down the comic market most generally by 45% of the sales, units sold in North America. This is in North America, US and Canada. 45% of the market share was going to be Marvel books, 35 was going to be DC, 10 Image, and 10 everybody else.
Yeah.
That's 100, right? 45, 35, 10, 10.
Let's say yes.
It is now. So that those are all plus or minus 3 or 4 percentage points per month, but that's generally what it was. And then in 2018, 2019, Image lost 2 major books. Saga went on hiatus for 3.5 years, and The Walking Dead ended very abruptly.
Huge, 193 issues.
Yeah, they ended very abruptly, and Marvel and Saga's back now, but Image has ever since then they've been like really pushing to try. What's the next big thing? What's the next Walking Dead? What's the next Saga? And they were doing that the whole time Saga was gone, and they didn't find it, and now Saga's back. But they've always been looking for that, and while that in that time frame, that was 2018, 2019. There was kind of a bit of a hole in some of the independent publishing, and I think Boom is the publisher that really stepped up. Prior to them, I think they were mostly considered. They had a bunch of different imprints like Boombox, Arcania, and like Boombox was really kind of a younger reader YA line.
Right.
Still a lot of really good books there,
But now they've got, for years they've had like Over the Garden Wall and some popular things that people who are not really comic readers will come for Over the Garden Wall. Adventure Time, right?
I think so as well. Well, they also have they have Power Rangers in terms of IP, and and the Power Rangers are massively successful, and they have done some really incredible work in terms of tying all the multiple different Power Rangers. Like it's a whole crazy multiverse thing going on with them. No idea, but the people who love it really love it. They also have all the Whedonverse stuff, Buffy, Angel, Firefly. They publish all of that as well. And then, as Image was looking for a next big hit, another huge kind of tentpole comic, a title, Boom landed a handful of them. Like they landed Once and Future by Kieran Gillen and Dan Mora, and they landed maybe one of the biggest books in the last 4 or 5 years, which is Something Is Killing the Children.
Yeah.
Jamestown in the Fourth and Werther Dell'Edera. A few years earlier, those definitely would have been Image books. Those that come out in 2013, 2014, 2015, they would have been Image books. But when they come out in 2019, 2020, 2021, they are now at Boom. And those are some of the biggest sellers. Something Is Killing the Children is one of the craziest, biggest sellers in that we've seen in comics.
Like shocking.
Yeah,
it's just just shocking.
And that whole universe is spinning off other books, and it's just
which I think Image is now trying with Radiant Black. They've launched, which is good.
Yeah, it's a fine book, and they have a universe built around that. But they were chasing that. They were chasing a book exactly like Something Is Killing the Children. That is exactly the kind of book Image would have tried to have gotten. And the fact that they didn't, I don't know if it speaks to Image or what Image is or isn't doing, or what Boom is doing, but that's something that Boom got. And Grass Kings came around just when I think they were starting their ascent. Right as Image was maybe starting to level off, maybe drop a little bit, but definitely level off. Boom in 2017, 2018 was just starting to ascend and get more of that market share. And I think Grass Kings comes right at the beginning of that. And it's the first time.
And it's a shame to me that the small indie publishers have to cannibalize each other. Yeah. The fact that they're fighting over the same 10% slice of the pie, basically. And DC and Marvel, no matter how much they phone it in, no matter how much mediocrity they're cranking out, will have their market share.
Well, I'm not crying too much for Image. Image is their own.
They're
thing.
doing fine, and Image now has a writers' union, which I think is a strong step forward. They have a
creators' union. The people who, not writers and artists, but like the editors, the people who work in the publishing side there. But no, I just think it's indicative of there has been a bit of a shift on there. That and said Matt Kindt, he has his own imprint at Dark Horse now. So said, all of his stuff going forward, I think, is going to be on Dark Horse. So, there is a larger push that there are more avenues through creator-owned and smaller press independent publishing comics besides just Image. Now, Image is still a behemoth, and they still have a really good deal, and people who work there absolutely love it. And some of these guys will still do work with them. But I think the fact that there are more options out there, the fact that there are...
It's better for creators.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little harder on fans, but in this day and age, it's really not any different.
Yeah, and
I go to my shop, it doesn't matter whether Boom or Image made it, I'm going to grab it.
Exactly. But there are some people who, they never read a Boom. Like I said, I mentioned I've never read a book by Valiant. I've never, ever read a Valiant book. And some people
crazy to me.
Have never read don't even maybe are familiar with a publisher like Boom or Aftershock or Black Mask or something like that, but that these publishers are out there, and we're going to try to highlight them. I think this is an interesting.
It'll be a while before we get to Drawn and Quarterly. And some of the smaller.
But I think this this book, Grass Kings, is an interesting start to look at something like Boom, because again, I think it was, you know, you can almost think of Boom like kind of like your prestige TV, kind of like your AMC kind of thing. They don't got a whole lot of stuff out there, but the stuff they do have is really, really good.
Whereas I think Image is like
Image
focus features.
No, I would say Image would have been like HBO. It's all still very prestige. But everybody knows that stuff. Everybody's seen that.
Right.
As good as something like Breaking Bad or Mad Men or Better Call Saul are, like the actual number of people who watch those shows is still incredibly small, regardless of how good it actually is.
Yeah.
A lot of people watch HBO, and HBO still does a lot of really good stuff. And that's the mainstream idea of what prestige is. And that's kind of what Image is. And someone like Boom and these other publishers are smaller like that. And this I think is it's an early salvo for Boom of kind of stepping their game up and saying this is something that we can challenge for a different type of storytelling, a different type of book, different type of look. You know, something that maybe would have been an Image before, maybe Image would have passed on it. But you know, more publishers, more avenues for creators, and I think this is an interesting one to start with for people who maybe aren't familiar with a publisher like Boom.
For sure. And you can find the links to buy the collected editions of this on our website, which is storiedarcs.com, where you can also find us for social media. Facebook, you can join our discussion group. Twitter, you can yell at us in real time for our mistakes and errors. And Instagram, where we will always be sharing updates, linking you to creators' profiles and things like that, so you can keep tabs on these creators. And StoriedArcs.com is where you will find our podcast, where you can stream it directly from there or find it on your favorite podcast channel or app. And without any further ado, we highly recommend Grass Kings. Pick up Volume 1 and meet us back next week.
Peace.